Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode on the JayBee and Milly channel. We are here with the one and only, the mighty Mr. Mark Marsh.
Hey everybody.
So, we've got a bit of an interesting topic today, and it's one that I'd kind of been thinking about in the back of my mind for the longest time, but really it only came into fruition. I think it was in the premiere of, oh gosh, or Andy Tom interview, and that was when the chat was talking about the prospect of audiobooks. Now, I'm not talking about audiobooks in the traditional sense, in terms of, say, somebody narrating a large bit of text that was adapted from a novelization, but
Oh,
more in
okay.
terms of like dramatized audio. So I'll ask you, because this is the main point of comparison, and this is what initially made me think about it. Are you familiar with the company Big Finish at all, or Doctor Who Big Finish stories?
I've I haven't known about the company, but I know the Doctor Who ones because I do
Mm.
listen to them.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I'm
Oh, so it's like one of
envisioning.
them ones.
Yeah, so I guess to explain to the audience, let's say for instance there was no Return to Zombie Island, right? Let's say that that's erased, but for the special anniversary, actually no, let's put it into actual context. Because this is the special anniversary year of Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost, let's say Warner Brothers announced that Scooby-Doo Return to Oakhaven was going to be released this year in audio format. So from this perspective, that would mean that they would get. I'm just trying to think about the cast really quickly. Scott Innes, BJ Ward, Frank Welker, and I think, unfortunately, they'd have to get. I mean, Gray's brilliant, but because of the circumstances, unfortunately, Gray would have to fill in for Mary Kay Bergman. But by and large, the cast would stay the same. Again, hopefully with Tim Curry or whatever they decide to do. So basically, the main cast of each respective universe comes back. And what you then get is the audio dramatization, including a soundtrack, sound effects, and it is the cast reenacting that story as opposed to, say, Stephen Fry saying, and then Ben Ravencroft opened the book and said a chant, and Daphne got scared, like that type of deal. And the reason why I'm thinking that is because of those Doctor Who audio dramas that I haven't really listened to that many, but I've
They're
heard that they're
good.
good.
They're really good, especially for someone like me who likes to listen to some of those. Because normally I'll stick on a random audiobook and just listen to it and
Yeah.
use my imagination, even though there's a book for it or there is no book and it's just one of those storytelling ones. And the Doctor Who ones are very good. It's like I want them to be episodes, but I know it would never happen because they base it on old characters like Doctor Who, like David Tennant's character, but it's basically it shows more story than the season shows.
Mm.
So it gives
Yeah.
you more insight on what happened more during that Time Lord's run, which I kind of think fascinating. So see, like if it does happen with Scooby-Doo, that's great because all the mini fillers and all the other stuff that they can do, it's pretty much endless with audio because you can do like storytelling in a sense.
Yeah, but also production value as well, because one thing that I love about the Doctor Who one that we don't really need to worry about here is that, say, for instance, you could get Sylvester McCoy in to do a full-fledged story as the Doctor with no changes, whereas Sylvester McCoy, you couldn't really get him to do those types of stories on TV because obviously aging and stuff. And we don't really have that issue with Scooby, apart from the live actions, because it is all audio anyway. But it's just, I think, a really good way to delve into different canons. Like one thing that we were speaking about in the channel is the one thing that Scooby-Doo doesn't really have, in my opinion, is a consistent canon. Like everything is in its self-contained universe, but now we could expand on a different canon. So, for instance, one week there could be you could have a story title like I'll edit in like some of the Doctor Who front covers, but just imagining how it would look from this era, you wouldn't even need to animate anything, but the front cover will dictate what canon it's a part of. So one week you could have a What's New Scooby-Doo story with a lot of the cast coming back. Obviously, Matthew Lillard or somebody could come back as Shaggy, and that would be the What's New Scooby-Doo art style. Equally, you could have the Zombie Island art style, and that could see the return of Billy West as Shaggy. Like, I think it's a way to pay respect and honor to different canons and actually flesh out different universes, which I think is good. And also, in terms of production, like obviously these are really talented people that they're gonna get on board, but it's so much less to the point where you could have spin-offs from characters that Warner Brothers might go, I don't know if they can justify their own series, or I don't think they can justify their own, this, that, and the
It's
other.
like
Like,
Ghoul School with
yes,
all the kids now. You can
literally.
do that as a story because everyone wants to see them return. Even I do. And they did at some point with a special onto another show, I forget what it's called, where they showed the cast from the
Oh
Ghoul
yeah, it
School and
was
they
like
referenced,
okay,
yeah,
KO, Let's Be Heroes or something like that.
which I thought was very good nod to it. But I really wish they would come back and like do something with the Ghoul School cast because I feel like it's still relevant to this day. And I think even a younger audience would still enjoy it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because I mean that's another thing that I'm gonna get onto, but
I think the only creepy thing about that was the mirror scene with Evil Shaggy because it made me, as a kid, like
that
question the
was
mirror. I was
yeah.
like, is it going to take me? Am
It
I
was
the
one of
evil
those
one?
things like the Mary Jane like mask scene that was always that kind of uncanny valley to me
Yeah.
where it was almost like the twisting or something, which is good for animation, but as well, like
Like
in
back
terms of
then, that
audio.
was very good, like
Mm,
CGI, like animation, like that scene worked with this Mary Jane like mask and that. But if we look back now at it, we're like, God, that CGI is rubbish because we're so used to seeing CGI now, like in the Avengers and all that. So it's just like look at the old CGI, we're like, maybe it wasn't that great, but it was still good for its time because I never questioned it until
yeah, and
now. It's
it's
like,
always how you interpret it, like how you remember it. That there are so many instances where I'm just scrolling through like TikTok or something, and there's a clip from like a hyper realistic recreation of Mario Galaxy or Mario 64, and they've done it in like some Unreal Engine where everything looks crisp and amazing. And there'll always be a comment of, "Oh, this is how I actually thought it looked as a kid." Like, and that's so true. Like, because for all it may not be as modernized or whatever as nowadays, it's always how it makes you feel at the time. So I think that's kind of what's going on there. And that brings me on to this version of an audio. Now, I can get loads of dislikes, loads of bad comments, but I'm going to make an assumption here. I think it takes a certain type of kid, or maybe even someone older, to physically sit down in this day and age and take in a purely audio story and not something that is animated or live action or something, that can be told to them by a person. So I think that an audiobook gives the franchise license to be a little bit more mature with the storytelling. And I don't mean like adult animation or adult stories, but I think that banking on your audience being on the level where they can have the attention span to sit and listen to prolonged audio, I think maybe then you could go with more complex mysteries, more in-depth clues and stuff like that, like maybe even a longer runtime for some of the stories. And that's one thing that really does excite me as well, the fact that you could get those types of things produced. There's also a potential downside that I want to get your opinion on. Now, on one hand, again, when we do compare it to that Doctor Who aspect in live action, we could literally have a third Scooby-Doo movie with all the original cast. Again, people like Freddie Prinze Jr. said he didn't want to come back, but there are people that even fill in, say, for like Christopher Eccleston in the Doctor Who side of things, that could maybe voice match Prince Jr. or a Geller, and you could have Cardellini, Lillard, and Neil Fanning and everything like that. So that's good. That's a positive because you could tell the same stories and not even need to worry about aging. But then I'm also thinking they could also give us a really good season 3 of Mystery Incorporated in audio form. But do you think Warner Brothers would maybe use that to go, we can do this and it's a lot cheaper than a series, so now all our good ideas are going to go to audio? And is that something that maybe would annoy you a bit?
If that would annoy me because I prefer a series that I can watch and
Mhm.
see. An Audible version is great, but I wouldn't like it as a main series. Maybe as like a short or a special and just like shows a third party perspective, like filler and that type of stuff. That would be acceptable. But like for whole season 3 or season 1 of something, I would rather it be something we can watch together. If they want to do an Audible one
Yeah.
as well for people who can't see, that's still great.
Oh,
But
see, that's a good
at
idea.
the same time, I would rather have the main series that we can watch and see on DVD, and then the prospects of filler being on the Audible book.
You see,
Something
I
like that anyway.
like
Because
that.
as a way and as well, the Audible ones
Mm.
will be digital. They won't be physical, so you won't actually own it as the collector. So it's one of those downsides where you pay for it and then you can listen to it, and they're not really that long. They could be like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, sometimes an hour, sometimes shorter than that. But you don't actually own it. If they did it back in the day where they actually did them on like discs or tapes or something like that, I would be interested in buying it, but they would never do that because production costs and it would be too much.
So that's a question that I had because I've got one really old Doctor Who audio. I mean, it is pretty much just an audio book in traditional form, but with David Tennant. I mean, it's narrated by David Tennant in his Scottish accent, but when he's the Doctor speaking as the Doctor, he's using his Doctor accent. But is the modern day Big Finish stuff completely audio, like completely digital there?
Yeah, it's all digital, most stuff now.
Oh, see, that's interesting.
Because I got Audible on my phone, which is connected to my Amazon Prime, but I pay for it, so I pay for like a monthly subscription, which gives me two free tokens to use on Audible titles. But it's good to have. Don't get me wrong, I do like it. But at the same time, it's like I don't own any of it because majority of this now is not on physical, and I miss the old physical stuff because at least I can hold it in my hands and be like, yes, let me get my tape deck out and let me stick this in there and listen to it.
1,000,000,000%. Because I do miss that era, but at the same time, if it is purely digital, as you're saying, I mean, from Warner Brothers' perspective, relatively cheap to manufacture. But let's get a bit like fan casty, or let's get a bit more like, fanboy about this whole situation. So there's situations where people have been recast because of contracts from, television that I can completely understand why, but I don't necessarily agree with. So for instance, I do personally believe that a Return to Zombie Island should have featured, say, Billy West, Scott Innes, and stuff like that. At the same time, I also think that Mystery Incorporated season 3 should feature Mindy Cohn and not Kate McCucci. But I completely understand why that would need to be changed because of contracts. But with like a Big Finish audiobook setup, pretty much anyone could be brought on board for a specific story. Is there a voice actor that previously played a character or something like that that you don't think would commit to animation in terms of that form that you would love to bring into the world of Scooby-Doo audio?
I think many animators wouldn't like to do the Audible as a full-time thing because the money wouldn't be as great as the actual show itself. So a lot of them won't do it, which I understand because they need to put food on the table.
Do you
But there are
reckon?
some that
Because
can do
if
both, which is
Big
great.
Finish can
But
get like David Tennant and stuff, I
they
think.
can do David, like the thing is that like their schedules, like even though it's just Audible, it still takes a lot of time to go through and read it. So it's just the same amount of length as you would do a series or a movie or animation. Like whatever script you're doing, it should be the same process, but you get paid less because you're not really getting paid the full amount. It's just, you're doing lines and then you do the Audible book and then you get a percentage back from that, but so it's not really worth more than the series because once you buy on digital, that's it. At least with the movies and animations, there's the physical media aspects where they get paid for as well, not just the digital sales and that. So they get paid for what they do, plus royalties and all that. There's more royalties in the other option. So it's really rare to see someone do both. At least with David Tennant, he does acting, which is different than voice acting. So he could probably be
Mm.
more leeway with it.
That's a good point.
But if he was doing voice acting on a series, he would stick to that rather than do the Audible one. So but fair play, each their own. But it's really hard to find a good. That's why a lot of people who do Audibles now on Audible, a lot of old people. So it's just like one of those things where you're not going to really get a lot out of it.
See, that is a good point because again, I don't know how different the format is, but speaking to Neil Ross, and some others, they spoke about doing audiobooks like, you don't get paid by the minute as such. You get paid by, page number of the story or, like a flat rate. And so the quicker you do it is, you just get paid for whatever it is. It doesn't matter how long the book is in terms of how long it takes them to record. So that's a good point. But let's say like, this is some bigger budget stuff. Like, what actors would you like to see from the past of Scooby and come along for a story? Because I know me personally,
I would
it's gonna
love to
be
see
like the
the
live
original,
action.
but I would like to see the concurrent generation, who's currently doing the animation show, do the Audible one because at least it's relevant. It's matches with today's standard. Whereas you choose an old generation, like from us with the 2000 movie, most of this new generation aren't going to know their voices because they're not in tune with it. So it's like I'd rather have the current gen Scooby-Doo gang voice actors doing the Audible ones.
And so is that like irrespective of story? So say for instance, if they did want to do an expanded media on the realm of Spooky Island, Monsters Unleashed, would you still want it to be, say, you've got Grey instead of Sarah Michelle Gellar or a Sarah Michelle Gellar stand-in, and Kate McCutcheon instead of Linda Cardellini, or how would that work?
Because like I still like them actors in the live action one, but they don't really like sound as Fred, Daphne, and Velma. I think the only one who sounds like their character is Matthew because he sounds like Shaggy in the movie than he does in the series. Whereas the others, they just did the movie. They weren't acting to be the characters because they weren't doing it part of the series. So for me, if I was just listening to it and I was hearing the concurrent gang, it wouldn't bother me because I was thinking, okay, that's definitely Fred, that's Velma, that's Daphne, that's obviously Shaggy, and that's Scooby Doo. But if you choose the live action ones and they do the older ones, they're just going to talk in their normal voices that did in the movie. And since they're older now, their voices have probably got more deeper and more different. So they probably won't sound as like they did back then, which then
Hmm,
throws me off
that's a good point. Although,
because they weren't acting as Fred. If you look at all the other
true, it
boys,
was
Freds,
them.
he didn't sound like Fred. He just acted like Fred. So it's different, sounding and acting. So I just feel like he can act in that, but I feel like if doing audible, he won't be good at it. It's like Stephen Amell and oh, I forgot his name now. The Grant Gustin who did the Flash
Oh
and
yeah.
the Arrow and that they did they do the TV series acting and they're great. But when they came and did the Vixen movie, they had to reprise their roles, and as an animation, they had to do go in for the voice acting bits. And even though it does sound like them, it didn't feel like them because they weren't voice actors; they were actors. So out of the elements where they couldn't really perform like their true selves because they were just reading a bunch of lines. So I thought it would be that same concept. If you saw the show and watched Vixen, you would know what stand I'm
Yeah,
coming
I've got a
from.
bit of experience with something like that. So, say for instance, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is one of my favorite Marvel shows. Season one takes a long time to kick in, but then I think from the latter end of season one onwards, I really, really love it. Fan favorite characters in that series, Fitzsimmons,
Oh yeah.
two great people. They then had a guest spot on the animated show Ultimate Spider-Man, and for all I don't think it was a bad performance, there definitely was such a dramatic disconnect when they were in a different format. So I agree to that extent, but also I wouldn't put it past these guys to pull something a bit different out because that was instances where live action characters were specifically brought into animation because hey, it's the live action guys. But when you think about Freddie Prinze Jr., and again, I don't even think he would come back anyway, based on what he said in interviews with like comic book and stuff. But he's done so much voice acting for the Star Wars, the Bad Batch series. Sarah Michelle Gellar, I think she's done some voice acting. I don't know. But then Linda Cardellini was voice of Lila in Guardians of the Galaxy 3, along with Hot Dog Water in Mystery Incorporated. So I think that because they have grown older, that is a factor. But also, I think they've grown a lot more in terms of experience doing voice stuff that maybe they could do something a little bit different. But again, I don't think we will ever know unless we actually hear that. But it would be, it's an interesting concept to throw around 1,000,000%. Again, though, like just Matthew Lillard, more Matthew Lillard stories would be good. Um, there's also a lot of different concepts that I like the idea of for this format because I think keeping the voice cast the same, you can expand on just so many different things. Like, think about a show like Scooby-Doo and Guess Who. It isn't my absolute favorite, but I feel like the potential there to do different guests, and again, there's a lot of Scooby-Doo crossovers. But the potential for guests, I think, is crazy when you consider that audio form. Again, though, I'd rather expansions on some of the older stuff versus Warner Brothers going, let's just do the cheapest thing and make our next Scooby-Doo series purely audio and focus on money-making crossover DTVs type there. Like I'd rather say like an audiobook in the style of What's New or an expansion on the live action universes rather than, you know, something too recent, if that makes sense.
I feel like if they did that, they'd lose more money and the audience would fade because not a lot of people would like switching from a show to an audible aspect. They'd lose interest because the audible has to be really good for me to be interested in it. Like the Doctor Who ones, they were great because of David Tennant being in there, so I could listen to them and not get bored. But for Scooby One, if I had to have a series as audible, it will be less entertaining because I have to use
Mm.
most of my like my imagination, but at the same time, I won't feel the same connection as I would normally do with Scooby Doo.
I know what you say, and as well, something like Doctor Who, it isn't just the same story each time. Like, even if you boil it down to there's bad guys, the Doctor stops them at the end, that's it. But there's so many other different paths that you can go with something like Doctor Who's. Take, for instance, the episode Blink with the Weeping Angels. I'm glad that that was televised, obviously, but something like that would have been achievable in that universe, along with traditional stories. Whereas Scooby-Doo, it's always, and again, this is boiling it down, but it's there's a creepy ghost that shows up. They run around for a bit, and then the ghost is unmasked. And there's only so many times you can tell that story, and it's entertaining. And so, by telling those same stories in audio form, I do get what you're saying. It could come across as very formulaic, very much like just watching an episode of the show, but with your eyes closed. And so I think to go down this path, they would need to, I dare say, like I was kind of saying before, expand on some of those darker, more complex stories that simply wouldn't work in their eyes in today's aspect. Like it would, like on the level of a zombie island or at least spinning off someone that could do something different. So, say for instance, all the Hex Girls, their spin-off or a spin-off being in audio form, I feel like you could forget about mysteries, forget about, unmaskings, and tell a different type of story. Like maybe they're on a world tour, you get new songs. And oh, I mean, the live action Mystery Incorporated series was setting up that they had some like Wiccan secret, something that could delve into those types of stories and themes. But then I guess how much are you banking on that being successful? It's a risk because it isn't the core gang, but I think it's worth trying telling different stories within different universes. And again, I think that is good world building from a point of view where even if you are switching shows or switching, canons, I think just having the Hex Girls and you know what version of the Hex Girls you're dealing with, like the Witch's Ghost art style just on the cover, I think something like that would be
I think
interesting.
people will buy it, but it's whether or not they will continue buying it and like, supporting it. That's the
Mm.
thing, because
That's
they're
quality,
gonna have to do
really.
classic ones like Witches Goes or the Hex Goes to draw us in, to start buying it, to get us hooked on it, and then they started doing their own random ones. And I feel like that's when I lose interest. But doing background stories on most of the other cars, like the Hex Girls or Sheriff Bronston,
Yes. Oh, and Patrick
they could do.
Warburton, his voice
His
always.
voice is perfect. I love. He'd definitely come back for the audibles.
Bro, I would buy an audiobook of Patrick Warburton just reading every single line of the dictionary.
I
Like,
I would like him to read the Harry Potter books and just do them.
you know what though?
His
That is
voice is
perfect
like,
though, surely, because surely Patrick Warburton, like that
because
obviously that's a
he was
criminal,
designed,
like he's
he
a
was
police
born to
officer.
be a voice
Yeah.
actor. That is the most crazy thing. His voice is just like it's like God level. His voice.
You could tell different stories with Sheriff
Yeah,
Bronson Stone, like the Crystal Cove files, or like mysteries from Crystal Cove, where it's just all those monster villains. Again, this is going back to formula, so I do apologize. But all those monster costumes are in the Crystal Cove Museum. And within that timeline, I don't think it's ever stated that Mystery Inc. specifically solved them, although we do know Velma has knowledge on who was who, but that could just be down to her being the tour guide and her parents being involved in that establishment. But Sheriff Bronson Stone finding different ways to apprehend some of those, or just different stories in general, like just him solving actual crimes. Again, you don't want to go too blood murder with it, but different types of crimes, I think would be fun.
because his
Oh,
character made that show. It's like I just love seeing his character because it's a stupid sheriff that just who's more concerned about having some type of like tourist attraction. Oh, there's a monster wreaking havoc. Good, keep it. Tourists are
yeah, like
coming.
oh,
More money
stream
for the
of
town.
revenue.
Yeah, stream revenue. Like that. It was perfect.
Oh, you could build a whole world
Even
on
the
that.
opening to the first episode was so funny of getting slammed in the jail cell because,
Yeah, and they were like
oh, yeah,
celebrating.
oh, oh, even when they like it's stuff that comes out with it. This is why you guys don't investigate thief stuff because you could cocoon people.
It's just he's so good. And if there's one thing that I'm thinking of now, and again, I'm comparing a lot of things to like the world of Doctor Who just because that's the only audio format like this that I'm familiar with. But they've got a whole Torchwood series for Big Finish, right? And I think Sheriff Bronson Stone could be a great headliner for something, child-friendly, Torchwood adjacent, a group of people solving more down-to-earth crimes within the world, within that wider world. So you could have Sheriff Bronson Stone, the leading man, as Sheriff, as Patrick Warburton always, but then perhaps cast someone that could bounce off that character to be Sheriff Bucky and or Deputy Bucky, and then at that point you could have several other police officers or a detective inspector within the Crystal Cove police station that would act as supporting characters, like and just seeing Patrick Warburton interacting with maybe there's one of them that's a bit goofy, maybe one of them he gets along with, maybe one of them he doesn't get along with, maybe someone's a new hire and they're our surrogate character. Like I think there's a lot that they could do with that. And again, though, if push comes to shove, we would want that to be an animated series, obviously. But I think audio wouldn't be a
They
bad
could
place
do
to
its
take
own
that.
series or movie just on the character alone. Even an Audible series, we would all be down to listen to that. They should
Oh,
definitely bring him back as like a sheriff for the movies and then
there's
just
a
have his
funny
quirks here and there.
meme. Did you watch the Ant-Man movies?
Oh, I've seen the first one.
Yeah, there's that character, Louise, that
Oh,
retold all of the different stories, but
yeah.
in like a really funny way. I would actually pay for a series of Sheriff Bronson Stone kind of breaking down every DTV. Like just go recapping, just like, oh yeah, so there was the Phantom, like, actually, just a commentary to write. I just want more Sheriff Bronson Stone, like him reacting to every DTV. I could watch that as a series. Like, just
I feel like he makes the series worth watching. Like in Cusco School, and like that movie, and then there came a series that his character made those series and movies. Like so well that they
Yeah.
made a spin-off
You got
based on the
Kronk's New
character. Yeah,
Groove,
Kronk's New Groove.
which I actually really like. Like it actually, it's such a
And
good one.
I'm just like, he's they loved him so much they gave him his own spin-off show, which did better than the actual main series. So I feel like
I
that's what Warner Bros. Should do. They should just do a Sheriff Bronson spin-off, throw in the Hex Girls in there, be a laugh.
see. This is what I'm thinking of.
He could be the Hex Girls bodyguard.
You know what? See that I mean, okay, I always want Sheriff Bronson Stone to the point where if they did make a Mystery Incorporated season three, because Crystal Cove is like crimeless at the end of season two, he should definitely go and apply for a job as campus security in like the Miskatonic University. Like he needs to stay around. But with what you just said about all that, just different ways that you could integrate him into things is a must to the point where I'm really grateful to know that the creators behind, say, something like Holiday Haunt were going to include him back, which just that alone makes me upset that Holiday Haunt was cancelled. But how do you feel about some of these cancelled projects seeing the light of day on audio format? Like, say, let's say it's a loophole. I don't know this for sure. This is purely just conjecture at this point, but let's say we can't monetize the movies, we can't monetize the storyboards and animatics, but we can retell the story. Let's do it on audio just so people know what we're going for. Like, again, I don't know if that is a loophole, but how do you feel about
If it was the only
that?
option that we can get that, I'll take it. But I would still hate it if we had that option, but then we wouldn't get the series. Like I would still, I'm still holding out hope that series will come. But if it doesn't, and we know for sure, yes, do the Audible. But if I had to choose between one and the other, I would still wait for the series or the movie, regardless.
Yeah,
Because it's
yeah. I
Holiday
mean,
Hunt, like it's the Hex Girls movie.
you got
I don't
Haunted
know
High
why
Rise,
they didn't
Holiday
release it.
Haunt.
Do they know how popular those bands are? Like
It is heartbreaking.
they were in one or two movies and what's his Scooby Doo, and it's just like and they were in Mystery Incorporated, so that they throw them in there. They throw the Hex Girls in as reference in like most of the series. So it's like maybe it's time to give them their own movie or their own series, or just do a spin-off series with some of the popular Scooby Doo cast. Like Hex Girl, Sher Bronston, like they're popular enough to have their own series, and we still buy it.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
I
would.
can't say that we won't buy it because that's ridiculous. You release what was it? Returns on Money. If you that's the worst movie ever, but you released it on DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K, we'll all buy it,
Yeah.
even though it sucks. We'll buy it, and they know that.
I mean, there's
So for
only
them to say they
so
won't make
many
profit is a lie.
characters outside of the gang that you can bank on. Like 100% the Hex Girls, 100% Sheriff Bronson Stone because of the pedigree of Mystery Incorporated. But as we rightly said in this, the star power and charisma of Patrick Warburton. Do you think that there's any others in the world of Scooby that could have that draw beyond the original gang? Because I'm thinking, and I don't know.
I guess Scooby Dum could have his own series.
Yeah,
Dum
but
dum dum dum.
oh, see, that's a nostalgia one.
Sherlock Dum.
But I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much star power that would have.
I think it'd be great having like a web short or an audible short of Scooby Dum
I would love it, but
as
there's
Detective Sherlock Dum Holmes.
there's a lot where it's just people that are so well known and so famous that if they came back and promoted it well, it would do good. So say, for all I don't think Mr. Mondavarius
I
is a
think
beloved
all
character, Rowan
Wacky Races would be a
Atkinson,
perfect one.
like that's
Wacky
like an
Races as
ensemble.
Audible would be.
Oh,
It could even sound like an Audible when you watch the TV series.
this is okay. This is a good example of how they could use expanded media. So we all know Scoob came out. Some people loved it, some people hated it, some people just didn't care. But it was meant to expand a wider universe that we're probably not gonna see now. I wouldn't mind exploring that universe a little bit as long as they get good writers in. to actually take it in a good direction. So, for instance, I would listen to a Dick Dastardly audio series if Jason Isaacs came by. And I think he's got enough star power to carry that as well. I don't know. Does he have any social media presence? I mean, obviously he's in Harry Potter as one of like the main like antagonists, and he's quite well known. But I would listen to Dick Dastardly, Jason Isaacs audio. I can't say the same for like say Tracy Morgan, Captain Caveman, but if they just got the right people in to voice some of the expanded kind of areas around that
If it was the
universe.
original Caveman, yes. But the new voice actor for the Captain Caveman, no thank you.
uh,
I didn't feel Captain Caveman energy in the Scoob movie. And I was really looking forward to the Captain Caveman intro. I was like, you had one job
I
to
wouldn't mind
ruin your vocal
prequels.
cords.
Like we had obviously like I don't think there's any way on planet Earth that they would get a McKenna Grace or an Ariana Greenblatt to do an audiobook now. But say for instance, if they hire someone and unfortunately he's passed away, but someone on the level of Kevin Conroy to play the original Blue Falcon, the dad of the Brian
Yeah.
character. Oh, I would love a series like that. Like if they, I mean, I don't know who would do it. I think David Kaye is a good choice because he played Blue Falcon in Guess Who. Someone with like a strong voice, and then you could even factor that into a more traditional look on Dynamo, like the goofy, like oh BF, like that type of Dynamo, as opposed to Ken Jeong, who I know people don't like. I thought it was a good interpretation of a bored Dynamo that was just fed up of this son of the original Blue Falcon. But I think with the original Blue Falcon, a more true to form Dynamo would be good. And you could tell so many stories in the genre of like superheroes and Caped Crusaders that I think that would be fantastic. They just got to get like the right person with the right star power and charisma for do something like that.
They have the right energy for the character.
Maybe
They have to
you
make
you could
themselves.
audition.
I'll be fucking. I'll,
Would you audition? Like if you saw like Big Finish, Scooby-Doo,
it,
like
I would probably like to be the villain.
Villa.
I would love to voice act like villain roles because I feel like they're great. I would hate to play the main hero roles or the good guys or something like that. I'd rather play something that sticks me out. Like, you know, villains get all the best lines and
Yeah, or they
they
could
get all
even get
the
like a
nice,
song like
cool, yeah, the
evil.
songs, the look, the charisma. Like, it's perfect being the villain. 9 out of 10, you do die, but at the end of the day, you're better than anyone else. But it's
I like
mostly
it.
the passion energy. I could definitely pull off for the villain.
There's some that I don't think would work because of popularity of the character, but it would be interesting to hear a return. For example, Sue Blue as Flim Flam. You know what though? They could wrap up that story relatively faithfully. Like they could throw out like Curse of the 13th Ghost and have a series Matthew Lillard, Grey Delisle, Sue Blue, and potentially Scott Innes because obviously we don't have Lenny Weinreb anymore, or Don Mezek, but or we don't have who played Daphne in the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo? Was it Heather North still? I want to say it was, but I'm not 1,000,000% just on the top of my head. But you know what I mean? Like you could have say that original cast there to a point, and they could do something like that, just tying up loose ends. Because again, I was thinking I would even listen to a Scott in a Scrappy thing, although Scrappy isn't such a beloved character.
No, it's just like now they make sure he's hated on. I still love the cameo in Mr. Incorporated. Him in the wax museum with all the others. It's
They
just
could
like
right some wrongs that some people had with that, though. Like they said
because
at the end of the first one, he was
they could
corrupted by the demon
yeah,
writers. They
but
could redeem him in audio
they
form.
could redeem him or show more context in the audible form, like show what happened leading up to that, what made him possessed with that power and that. Because I think after that movie, it's pretty much like they're symbolizing, yeah, okay,
I want
character's dead.
audio of Scott Innes kidnapping Rowan Atkinson to take over and just shoving him in the basement. That's what I want from this whole argument. I just want to hear that.
That was
Or just like preludes, like Rowan
I
Atkinson
love
doing
Rowan
monologues,
Atkinson.
like as he's in the in the cave, just like his hair growing out, he's just
The
rotting
thing that Rowan
away.
Atkinson was in a Scooby-Doo movie,
Like that's mad. And
technically
oh,
as a
he's so
villain.
good. He's so good. And apparently, I've seen recently, apparently they're doing a fourth Johnny English, which
That's gonna be
again,
good.
and I like all of them. I think I wanted them to be a bit more coherent to each other, but I kind of don't mind that they're not. But a fourth one would be good.
It's sometimes weird seeing him speak because even though he plays Johnny English, he's still Mr. Bean. And I
He's Mr.
can't get
Bean,
he's Mr.
Johnny
Bean for life. I'm
English,
just like he puts
Emil
talking, but also
Mondavarius.
being Mr. Beanie is just like it's how that
Oh, this is off topic. Did you see Man versus Bee on Netflix?
yes.
It's like they're like literally like 10-minute episode, but I binged the whole thing. I just
But
thought it was just such like a fun, just a fun time. Oh, I want a season two of that. But yeah, see, this has just been a love letter to people like Rowan Atkinson, like Patrick Warburton. That I just think, I mean, they're all well known for their charisma, their voice, and I just I don't want Warner Brothers to take an idea of an audiobook because again, this is just speculation on our point. We're just discussing like what would happen if they did. I don't want them to use it as a replacement for an animated series because Scooby was born in animation and I think has actually had some of the highest highs in animation. But the world of expanded media, I think, if it would open the door to some of these fantastic performances returning that we've had over the years, I'm all for that. I think that would be absolutely great. So, Mark, what's your kind of final thoughts on it? Like, is there any particular story you'd want to see told? And do you think that this is something that Warner Brothers are going to look into?
if I want them to do more like background characters, like leading up to most of the villains or side characters, like Scrappy Doo, whatever happened to him. Maybe we could do a storybook about that, or the villains that they get captured. What kind of rehab program do they go through? Are any released? Are they doing well on the outside, or the heck skills and that? So they got those type of things I would look more interested in because we've seen the gang solve mysteries. We want to know the aftermath, what happens to the villains or the bad guys that get captured, taken away, and does any of them get reformed, especially the older villains from the original series? Like maybe they're released, maybe they're on parole, maybe they're doing well for themselves. They don't really show the characters like the bad guys having a good time or being reformed. They're mostly
Yeah.
showing them go back in their life of crime. So maybe something down that line is showing you know the prospects of the villain side more than the gang side. And
So,
if Warner
oh,
Bros.
that's
Were
a
going to do
great
it, I would
idea.
like them to at least like throw in like a physical option, just so that way collectors can at least own it and say,
Mm,
yes, we got an
facts.
audible version.
I'm just imagining now, like Tim Blake Nielsen coming back as
A
Jonathan Jacobo doing
Scooby
like
Doo
a
vinyl
Joker version
record.
of like just
Just
imagine
have
him
that on the
dancing down the
wall.
stairs. See, that would be great. And just to go alongside like all the DVDs is just that's like a dream. They could even do like limited runs. Like, oh, see, this is me. I get so excited thinking about collectibles to the point where I want this audio, like if they are doing audio stories, I want audio stories on CD. I also want an option to get it on cassette in a nice little case. Like, I just get so excited when it comes to physical media. It's actually a genuine problem, and I do need help. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of potential that I see personally. And I'd love to. Maybe like I should have given you more time to think about this. If you don't have an answer, just say. But is there a particular writer from the past of Scooby that like if they're gonna hire someone, then it should be them to tell these stories? And it could if you don't know the name, it could be whoever wrote that or you know.
It's gonna be a hard one to read too. I'll probably say the people who worked on Mystery Incorporated. But like those would have the bare insight to do the audible ones.
Oh, stop it. That's brilliant. Oh
Because
yes.
I feel like that
Yes.
that would work.
Mitch Watson. Um, and then Roger Eschbacher wrote some of those. Adam Beecham, Mike Ryan would be so good doing these. Oh gosh, what about
Because
Jim Krieg? Because I
they
know
were in
we've
the
kind of
right element
because
to
Jim
do
Krieg
that.
did Scooby Natural, but then he did Return to Zombie. Well, he didn't write Return to Zombie Island. I think that was who was that? I think that was Jeremy Adams and someone else.
Don't get the person who did Return to Zombie Island on the board.
But then he
We
also did Scooby Natural. I really want the Mystery Incorporated
it's
team. I
weird how you
think
go
you're
from
right.
Scoob Natural to whatever that was with Return to Zombie Island. It's just like
I also wouldn't even be angry at some of the Be Cool Scooby-Doo writers because I think from a comic level, and not necessarily story, but from a comedy perspective, I think that they're some of the tightest scripts that we've seen.
I feel like if they were gonna do a comic script on Scooby-Doo, get the people who did Be Cool Scooby-Doo, because I feel like that would fit well for a comic series. An Audible one wouldn't really that great. It's like too funny, like Be Cool Scooby-Doo was, because then you gotta use a lot of your
Yeah, it would
imagination
definitely
to
lose
try
a
and make it
lot.
funny.
It's like
And if you don't get the joke, it's gonna be hard to visualize that joke.
a little bit like with Rowan Atkinson doing audio. Like I think part of Rowan Atkinson is you can see the crazy things he does with his
You have to see his
eyebrows,
hand gestures,
like
his
his face,
face. I'm
like
just
doing
like,
all that type of
he
stuff. So
speaks 1,000 words without saying anything.
yes, yeah, and I think that's what Be Cool does
That's
in
what
some
makes him.
instances as well, like just the visual gag. So yeah, but Mystery Incorporated, all of those writers, um, yeah, basically we want all like even if they're not doing a season three yet, Mystery Incorporated writers, somebody pitch this idea to Warner Bros. We want you all to come on board for some audiobooks, and we will be collecting them all. So, yeah, I guess that was a longer episode that we've kind of indulged ourselves in. Maybe this episode will be a spectacular flop for us because I don't know how popular this idea is, but it is definitely something that I wanted to open up to the community, to the audience. So, yeah, Mark, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on my YouTube page or over on my social media on Twitter at IGosLuigi, Instagram at MarkMarsh94, and I am on twitch.tv at
Ooh.
IGosLuigi.
Twitch.tv. So yeah, we'll definitely be checking that out. You can find all of our links in the description down below as well. So yeah, thank you so much for watching another discussion. Now, I do want to say this at the end of this episode. I don't know when this is going to be released, but episode 50 or season finale or series finale, I guess, will be a goodbye slash finale Q&A. So if you do have any Q&A ideas for us, questions that you do want us to answer, please leave them in the comment section of this and any future episodes that we do put out. I will be answering that in the final episode. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.